I never set out to win a Nobel Prize. I only set out to do everything to the best of my ability, and I never put in a second-rate effort. With such resilience in his work, Sir Harold Kroto finally became the co-winner of the 1996 Nobel Prize for Chemistry. This professor from Florida State University was awarded the Nobel Prize for his discovery of the carbon compounds called fullerenes. This discovery opened up an entirely new branch of chemistry with consequences in such diverse areas as astrochemistry, superconductivity, and materials chemistry, physics. Professor Sir Harold Kroto presently carries out research in nanoscience and nanotechnology and has served as president of the Royal Society of Chemistry. He has also set up the Vega Science Trust, a UK educational charity and TV science channel accessed by over 165 countries, of which many programs have been broadcast on BBC, aiming to improve knowledge and raise awareness of scientific achievements.
Hello and welcome to this special edition of Talk Vietnam for an exclusive interview with 1996 Nobel laureate in chemistry, Professor Sir Harold Kroto from Florida State University. It's our great honor and privilege to have him here with us. Today, we'll learn more about the discovery that won him the Nobel Prize and his unique philosophy of science. Professor Sir Harold Kroto, nice to meet you. Hi. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Did I have a choice?
How are you today?
Well, I'm still alive, more or less, but interesting, and my first visit to Vietnam, and so far it's been very interesting and enjoyable.
That's great. What was your first impression upon arrival?
Well, I haven't had a lot, but I mean, first impression is that there's quite a lot of building going on, and also that a lot of the houses that I saw were well constructed, and they, in a way that many buildings in the USA, they're made of wood and will fall down in a hurricane. But I've not been really here long enough to form an impression. I only know of Vietnam from outside and from films and things of this nature. But I have a good impression of Vietnam, partly because I see something deep in the culture that has allowed it to make friends with America after the difficulties of about 50 years ago. Yeah. And I think Vietnam has is a lesson to other countries in the world on how they can overcome those sorts of difficulties. And so I've always felt there's something special about the country that can do that.
And what made you decide to donate your valuable time and energy to the 4th ASEAN event series, Bridges Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace?
Well, I think I've been I'm invited somewhere every day, and that was one that interested me, but it took a long time to come and to be able to come, because I have a long backlog of requests. But I mean, peace is obviously something that interests me. My view is that I'm going around the world and talking to young people and trying to inspire them to do science and think about thinking for themselves, but also developing a humanitarian attitude, and hopefully, if they get into positions of responsibility, change the direction of politicians towards working together to solve their problems rather than sending young people to go and kill each other.
Yeah. And how about your schoolboy times? You were still a schoolboy when you developed what you call an unhealthy interest in chemistry.
Yeah, that's a bit of a joke, but yes, yeah. But when I was young, I was good at making things with my hands, and my father, who's a refugee, really ensured that I had things to make.
And you mentioned your father, so did your parents have a great influence on facilitating your interest in natural science?
Well, my father was an engineer, and he did influence me because he gave me an electric train set, and I had Meccano and things. He certainly these were things that were given to me, and I also had a big room it was an old house. It was really in the slums, but I had my own world in there, where I had a train set and made things out of a set called Meccano and things of this nature. So he definitely encouraged the practical side of things, and less so on the art side, because that, but I think, I even today think I'm better at that, although I've had much less practice at it than I really would have liked to have done more of that than I've been able to do.
Were you the best in your class as
No,
a student?
not at all. I was good, but I was never the best in the class, and it depends what subject. So I was up in the top quarter or third in general. The only thing I was best at as a young child was geography. I mean, that was the subject, and I remember coming top in geography and deciding, oh, I can be top in something. So I'll focus on geography, and I think that's part of it. But I don't like competition. I don't think it's healthy. I think the thing top of the form is not a good thing, because there are kids at the bottom. We've got to have a totally different attitude to schoolwork. We somehow have to encourage people, the young kid who's bottom of the form. What sort of incentive is that? So there's something really at a very fundamental level not right in the way that we imprint competition as being good in our schools and education programs. I don't know what the solution is, but that's definitely not one of them. Because every kid has some potential, and I think a lot of them, when they're bottom of the form, then feel that's it, and they can't achieve anything. And we need to rethink that.
Definitely. And what advice would you give to a child who would want to be where you are now? Well,
don't even think about it. I mean, I've said that I'm a Nobel Prize winner, and I never thought of this. And if people had said you're going to be a Nobel Prize winner, I would have said you're crazy. I didn't go into science to win any prizes. I didn't even go into it to be a professor. The advice I have to all children, whatever it is, it's not about science, is to find something which satisfies them. So, I don't like the word enjoyment. You say, I enjoy this. I don't enjoy hard work any more than anybody else does. On the other hand, I think people who are successful in being creative get something else. They enjoy when they've finished, but they're able to somehow just immerse themselves in a creative process where hard work doesn't seem hard work. It's something that the hard work pays off by achieving something at the end, and they're satisfied that they've done something that nobody else could do. But it's also something that is determination. And I tell young people, if you're doing something and a second-rate job satisfies you, find something else where only a first-rate effort, your best shot, will satisfy you, and then you'll be successful.
Sir Harry Kroto was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996 with Robert Karl and Richard Smalley for the discovery of C60, the molecule made up of 60 carbon atoms that garnered fame for being shaped like a soccer ball. C60 was named Buckminster Fullerene, or buckyballs, in tribute to the architect Buckminster Fuller and his iconic geodesic domes. The discovery of buckyballs led to an entirely new branch of chemistry, the science of fullerenes. Until then, carbon was only known to take on two forms. One was extremely hard, diamond, and the other very soft but electrically conductive, graphite. The new fullerene molecules and their close relations, carbon nanotubes, often exhibit both of these properties and are already being tested in solar cells, nanocircuits, and drug delivery systems. Carbon nanotubes have already proven to be the strongest materials in the world and promise exceptionally light and versatile components.
I have a mission to ensure that people understand science. Science is about asking questions and curiosity.
So how about your Nobel Prize? What triggered your discovery of C60 in 1985?
Well, I was interested in the chemistry in a star, but I've done 20 years of research to get to that, and we'd done some work in the laboratory with a colleague, David Walton, which ended up at a nice piece of research which ended up with the discovery of molecules in interstellar space by radio astronomy. And then other people discovered an interesting star which had some interesting chemistry. And I was interested in that. And just by really pure chance, I was visiting Rice University with a friend of mine, a scientist, Bob Curl, who said I should go and visit Rick Smalley in another lab. He's doing something interesting. And it looked interesting. And then I went to see him. And during this that visit for an hour, I could see that this technology that Rick had created really was revolutionary as far as cluster science was concerned. Might actually just solve a little problem that had been in the back of my mind. Not very important, interesting to me, not really interesting to anybody else. And then we did it, and it worked exactly as I expected, except that it had an incredible surprise, that it did something else. The result was, I mean, I didn't even need to do it. I mean, it seemed to me it was obvious it was going to give this result, but it did something else totally unexpected, and that led to the Nobel Prize. And there's a lesson here that here was an experiment that wasn't particularly important to my colleagues. It was more important to me personally, but not on a outside level. Just wanted to solve a little problem in my head, and here was an incredible breakthrough which was totally unexpected, and that's the way that many breakthroughs are made. It's not going after these important things. It's not competing with other people. If you're competing with other people, 100 other groups who think this is important, then you've only got a 1% chance of making the breakthrough. So do what you're interested in doing. Don't worry about others. Of course, you've got to convince people to give you the money to do it. Well, work hard on that, and then piggyback your real interest on top of this thing.
And you also once said that science is misunderstood in many ways.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that, please?
Well, the first that young people, and the iconic image of a scientist is really Einstein as an old guy with long hair, when in fact he was, he was a young man with very short hair when he made the big breakthroughs. So that's the first misunderstanding of who the scientists are. The second part is much more serious one, and that is that science is not understood by anyone, particularly people who are journalists. And that is the only 9 out of 10 times when a journalist comes to ask me about it, they ask, what are the applications of your discovery? Now, that's because the only thing understood is not the science itself or what the discovery was, but how it can apply to society. But that's not the way that much science works. The third thing, arguably more important, is how does a scientist discover something that's unknown beforehand, the scientific method, and how is that done? And that's the scientist. But I think there's something much more important than that. At a very deep intellectual, cultural, and educational level, and that is to recognize that science is really quite new. It really only goes back about 500 years. Before that, it was common sense. And common sense is what you need to survive. But before it was called science, it was called natural philosophy. And the point that I make is natural philosophy is the only construct we have to determine what is true with any degree of reliability. And I think we should teach that to young people in school. And we should teach them to question and ask people, ask their teachers, just a minute, you're telling me this. How do you know it's true? What is the evidence for what you're telling me? And if they can't find evidence, then it's not necessarily true.
Upon his arrival in Hanoi, Professor Kroto has joined a press briefing at Hilton Hanoi Opera. Let's take a look.
As part of the 4th ASEAN Bridges Dialogues Towards a Culture of Peace series, Nobel laureate Professor Harold Kroto was invited to be a speaker during his stay in Hanoi. Known for one of the most important contributions to the development of nanoscience, Professor Kroto hoped to have some impact on Vietnam's education sector.
We have invited Professor Kroto because he's speaking about education as a basis for peace, which is the main theme of the International Peace Foundation. Because we are supporting universities with connecting them with Nobel laureates. We are supporting education and schools because we think that this is the real basis for peace in the future.
Professor Kroto isn't only focused on science. He also has made a lot of efforts to help boost education and science around the world. Answering questions from Vietnamese journalists during the visit, he emphasized the importance of education, saying that it is good for the development of Vietnam in the future.
Your educational system must cater across the spectrum, from those who have, in the sciences are good at solving clear, important problems, to others who are good at solving their own problems that no one else has thought of, and then where surprising breakthroughs are made, which will be useful for Vietnam.
During this visit, Professor Kroto met Deputy Prime Minister VNtienganh and students at the Vietnam National University, Hanoi. This is the first visit of a Nobel laureate in chemistry to Vietnam.
So, how has the Nobel Prize changed your life?
Well, the first thing is that I gave a lot of lectures before, but now I give a lot more lectures, and it's an interesting question. So it has meant that I'm on the road, my wife is on the road, we're both on the road probably 1/3 of the year.
Oh, wow.
And we were in 127 hotel rooms,
Wow.
127 days in a hotel last year. And I feel a responsibility to, particularly to talk to students wherever I go.
Looking back at your career path so far, have you ever felt that it was tough to get through? What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome?
Oh, it was very hard. And I mean, personally it was very hard, but got a lot of support family-wise. Really a burden of taking off, and I think probably not very good because I worked too much, certainly at the start, over much, and I think to some extent, you know, that took the toll on the family a lot more. But I think science is not easy, and it was 100%. I mean, not later on, but certainly at the start to get research going. I didn't know how. I think if I'd known how hard it was, I would have done something else. I've often said it's like going in the ring with Muhammad Ali. And on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you get knocked out in the first round, you pick yourself up on Friday, maybe you get to the second round. Once a month, you get to the third or fourth round. Once a year, you get to the 10th round. And if you're incredibly lucky and he sort of has an off day, you might sneak around and knock him on the nose and, and you get the Nobel Prize. And that's hard to take, and you have to have a certain internal resilience, which most scientists actually have, and not everybody has. And not everybody has the supportive family around them that I had.
You made a summer 2012 presentation at the 62nd Lindau Nobel Laureate meeting in Germany. And this annual meeting brings together Nobel laureates and young researchers for integrational inspiration.
Yes.
A key line in your Lindau presentation was, "I'm not here to make you feel comfortable, I'm here to make you think."
Yes.
And so can you tell me a little bit about that experience in Lindau?
Well, I mean, I've been to Lindau many times, and as time has gone on, I underneath that has always been to get people to think, because I think it's very important that they don't accept what other people tell them. I also said, this is a quotation which I like very much: if you make people think they're thinking, they love you. But if you really make them think, they hate you. And this is by a journalist, Don Marquis, in the 1930s. I think that the young people who go to Lindau, many of them will be going to positions of responsibility, and they will become leaders. And for me, leadership is about leading young people to think for themselves, so that they no longer need to be led.
So we know you're committed to global science education and the development of internet streaming technologies.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about your success in the field?
Oh, I'm not sure it's successful. I think it's successful, but I started off over 15 years ago making programs for television, BBC television, because they had an open access slot. And in those days, the technology was very expensive, and it was quite expensive, and I had to pull in a lot of money to do this. And over 15, 16 years, I think we were very successful. But also, the internet became very powerful, and I recognize one of the greatest breakthroughs in education was Wikipedia. However, it seems to me it's objective. What we're trying to do is going to the next step from Wikipedia, and subjectivity. I want to see the person who created a particular idea. I like to see young people trying to teach. They don't even need to have a lot of experience. I just want to see their enthusiasm for that. We're distributing an idea so that schools, universities, individual teachers can contribute this, recording themselves, explaining particular concepts that they've developed. Everybody sees something in a different way. We're looking at the same object, the same idea, the same story, and they interpret it in different ways. And I think life is about that. Life is about human beings. And so I want to put subjectivity into Wikipedia, and we're doing that not just with teachers, not just with professors, not just with Nobel Prize winners, but with young kids of 6, 7, 10 years old. And they all come with their own little ideas with this. And perhaps they're a bit half-baked, but that's great, because they are now creating. Because education is not just about teaching kids what is known, but it's actually uncapping their creative potential as much as possible. And that's what we're trying to do.
During his stay in Vietnam this time, Professor Kroto, chemistry Nobel laureate, visited the Vietnam National University, where he gave a talk on education, the basis of peace and the key to an enlightened global community. Let's take a closer look.
Professor Kroto's arrival marked the second time that Vietnam National University Hanoi had the honor to be visited by a Nobel laureate since last December. Before giving his lecture, Professor Kroto was presented the honorary doctorate by the university leaders. This was considered a milestone in the strategy to improve science education and development in the education sector.
Hiện nay là chúng tôi đang chọn khoa hóa học để xây dựng cái khóa đầu tiên trong Đại học Quốc gia Hà Nội đạt chuẩn quốc tế. Thì rất may lần này thì chúng tôi được đón một cái nhà khoa học được giải thưởng Nobel về hóa học. Chúng tôi thấy rằng qua cái dịp này thì những cái hoài bão, những cái đam mê khoa học của sinh viên khoa học của trường Đại học Khoa học Tự nhiên Đại học Quốc gia Hà Nội sẽ được tăng lên rất nhiều.
Instead of spending time to explain how his research won him a Nobel Prize, Professor Kroto told students stories of his life, his other passions such as graphic design and sport, and his experiences in choosing a career. He said that being passionate about the things you like can only lead to good results. That's one of the key pieces of advice Professor Kroto gave to the Vietnamese students.
Was for this design. I would have been quite happy not winning the Nobel Prize. Okay, I was very happy with my science before we made the discovery. I felt I was a success. I didn't go into science to win any prizes, let alone the Nobel Prize. And that's very important, because I see here in Asia How do you win a Nobel? I don't know. I just do what I'm interested in. If it turns out something special comes, then maybe the Nobel Prize will come.
VNtienganh is among the chemistry faculty's many students that listen to Professor Kroto. Seeing a big name in chemistry in person sparked a passion for science among Hưng and his peers.
Sinh viên mà học về ngành khoa học thì ai cũng có một ít mơ ước về cái giải Nobel. Tất nhiên là nó rất là khó, nhưng mà thứ nhất hôm nay được gặp cái người gọi là đã từng đạt giải Nobel thì em thấy thích thú thì em quyết định là đến.
Khi biết được là quá trình phấn đấu của ngài thì em càng thấy rằng là mình càng phải cố gắng hơn nữa, và cũng như là một niềm sức mạnh để truyền cho em và cảm thấy được rằng là mình phải cố gắng hơn nữa để có thể biết đâu sau đấy là sẽ là sinh viên Việt Nam thì hoàn toàn có thể đạt một giải Nobel nào đó trong tương lai.
It could well be a long time before Professor Kroto has another chance to meet Vietnamese students again, but his words will remain in the mind of these young people, acting as guidelines and driving force for their decisions in the future.
So there it is. I'm only here to make you think. Thank you very much.
In your lecture here in Vietnam, when you spoke at the National University, you spoke about education, the basis for peace, and the key to an enlightened global community.
Yes.
So can you please brief us about the highlights of your presentation with some examples to illustrate?
Well, the first thing is education should be, as I say, first of all, teaching kids how they can decide what they're being told is true. The second thing is, and actually more important, is to develop a humanitarian attitude to the way things are, so that if they become scientists, they don't make more atomic bombs and landmines and things like this. But from a teaching point, they have to be creative, and I think to be creative, you have to have a wide education, not just in science. Whereas in the 50s, and when we were using it, we had to have rational attitude to fixing things. Car didn't work that well, so you had to work out, you have to have a scientific attitude to working out what you fix. And so the dynamics of the technology now, I think, are counterproductive as far as our young people are concerned, so that's a problem. And also the influences on them are not to do science and do things that are difficult and complicated. They see, you know, supermodels making a huge amount of money and celebrities making this, that, the other. And so there's less incentive to work hard and learn differential equations, which are not easy. So I point to those issues, or try to point to some of those thousands of issues in my presentation.
And after your first visit to the Vietnam National University, have you thought of any particular plans for cooperation or assistance?
Yes, I mean, perhaps the most important reason for my travel is I try to get schools and universities to cooperate with me and participate in this global educational outreach program for science, engineering and technology, which is GeoSet, so that they will contribute. And that will get young people, particularly students in universities, to contribute their ideas and what they find fascinating to this global cache of educational material.
So what do you think is perhaps the biggest challenge facing many young scientists today?
Well, I did talk about these. The first is to be a scientist at all, because it's not a real understanding of what it is. I think some of them want to win Nobel Prizes and they won't win them. They've got to do science because first of all, they can make a good living at it, which is useful, but also that they can play around with the way the universe is and be curious at where it is and work hard to find out how it works, why it works the way it does. The second thing, it's actually quite difficult because I think the world today is so highly technological that young people, when they have a mobile phone or whatever, they can't find out how it works, whereas all the things that were around me when I was a kid, I could take them apart and see how they worked. I might not be able to put them back together again, but I could see how it worked. I mean, I could take a clock to pieces and, oh, there's a spring, and I could see roughly how it worked. I couldn't put it back together again. And so my world was full of things that I could repair. And you learn how things work by repairing them. You can't repair them now. You can't repair a camera. I mean, I had a camera and I knew everything about that camera. And it works today as well as it worked then if I had the film to put in it. And I could probably make some film, right? But if my present camera goes, with all that electronics goes, then that's more or less it, because it'll be more expensive to fix it than to buy the next generation. And I think that's probably bad for the development of a scientific attitude. And I think we need to be aware of that. But there are also other problems for kids today. There were no people earning hundreds of thousands of pounds to play soccer. When I was sort of starting, soccer players in England got £20 a week, right? I could make more than £20 a week, I think, doing science. But I certainly can't make £100,000 a week doing science, whereas some soccer players are being paid that, and they're injured, you know? And I think that's not good. So we have this celebrity issue. So you know, footballers are being paid these huge amounts of money, and therefore that's a bad icon for young people, particularly the African American community in the USA, where most of the icons they have are American footballers, basketball players, and how many can be successful professionally in this? Not very many. And I look at Central Africa. What are their icons? They're marathon runners. Well, how many are going to be able to earn a living as a marathon runner? So I think it's very important that in the developing world they start to have icons, scientific icons, and I think it's fantastic that you have a Fields medalist here in Vietnam to show that you know, intellectual hard work and a passion to understand something in the mathematics and sciences is possible. But I'm sure he didn't do this to win a lot of money, or even probably to win the Fields medal, because it doesn't work that way. I mean, 9 out of 10 Nobel Prize winners, I am sure, are totally as surprised as I am that we won the Nobel Prize. There are one or two who tackled big problems, and I know them, and I just say, well, I don't tackle big problems, they're too difficult for me. And it turns out that, as I said before, the unexpected is where the big surprise is.
During the reception held in your honor, Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister VNtienganh said that Vietnam looks forward to your support in the future. Do you plan to return to Vietnam for any cooperation projects or to help Vietnamese scientists in some way?
Yes, I intend to return by internet at the very least, because I now can't go everywhere. So I now give presentations via the internet, and I do this maybe several times a year to India. And I've done this now to Iceland, to Germany, in Australia, to 2,000 kids, so I can reach people that I can't go any other way. But I'm hoping that it'd be a two-way thing, that there will be creation of educational material in Vietnamese here,
Yeah.
and contribution to this global initiative.
In a developing country like Vietnam, how do you think we should invest in science, including chemistry? What strategies or approaches should Vietnam consider for the future?
Well, not to think about competition, but to create an environment in your universities where young people, young scientists can do what they want to do rather than what people in authority think they should be doing. Because you can't be creative doing something you're not passionate about. And if you look at the big breakthrough, almost all the big scientific breakthroughs have been done by individuals not doing strategic science, but they're doing fundamental science of things that they're interested in.
So can you tell me, in terms of chemistry and your Nobel Prize, what do you think brought you the success?
That I never did anything other than something that I was determined to do the best I possibly could. I've always told young people, if they're doing something or doing a project where second-rate effort satisfies them, find something else to do. So I don't do things. All I do to the best of my ability. So I played the guitar at university. I wasn't that good, but it was the best I could do, and I wanted to do it. And so I for a year I really worked at it, and I was okay. I could play in a folk club, but I haven't got the time for that. I do my science. I go in, and it's the best I can do. I'm not going to do something where second-rate effort will satisfy me. So that's the first thing. And then I don't give up very easily. So I'm working on a problem now which is 25 years.
Wow.
It's not that I've been working on it for 25 years. It's something that puzzled me 25 years ago when we discovered this molecule, the fullerenes. And I didn't understand how it assembled.
So what role does your family play in your scientific success story? Yeah.
My wife a lot, because she took an immense burden off my shoulders. Because if you're an academic, you have to teach, you have to do research. Basically, it was a tremendous burden on my wife, and also I think on my kids, because to some extent I assumed they were going to be like me and work really hard. And they would be, but they chose careers which one wants to be is a film director, another one in cartoonist, and they're very hard to make a living there. And that's what they do, but it's tough, a tough area. Whereas I, to some extent, decided to do what I was told. I did what I was told. You might not believe this as a kid, and which was to work hard as science first, and that's paid off for me. But to some extent, because I've got all this, I wasn't able to help my kids as much as I perhaps should, because I always thought that my kids would be like me.
Thank you so much, Professor Kroto, for your time here with us, and we wish you all the best in all your future endeavors, and hope to see you again in Vietnam soon.
Okay, well, most likely on the internet. Okay, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
And that's it for today's edition of Talk Vietnam. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and found the inspiration from what Professor Kroto, Chemistry Nobel Laureate from 1996, has told us. Thank you, and see you again next time.